This is probably one of the more controversial opinions I hold when it comes to the landscape of the 155-pound division these days. Obviously, I was very vocal about the fact that I thought Charles Oliveira was going to beat Ilia Topuria via inside heel hook within 3 rounds. That did not pan out, but I think when it came to that opinion, a lot of people kind of understood where I was coming from, even if they didn't agree. Because, they would see the sequences I broke down with Oliveira's leg lock entries, with Ilia's defensive leg locks, and it made logical sense to them. With this one, though, I'm just getting ridiculed. Like, I'm getting laughed at. Nobody seems to take it seriously. They think I'm trolling, like, legitimately. Because obviously, at 155 pounds, the champion is Ilia Topuria. And there's a lot of argument and a lot of names being tossed around as to who should get to fight him next and challenge for the 155-pound title. And I think the clear contender should be Justin Gaethje. Now, that's where a lot of people kind of lose it. Like, what? Why Gaethje? What has he done? And then they're throwing out names like Paddy Pimblett, which make no sense to me at all. Why would we give Paddy a title shot? But, I'll say this. I'll preface this all with this. I am not a Justin Gaethje fan necessarily. Mostly because he started Tony Ferguson's losing streak, and Tony's like my favorite fighter of all time. So admittedly, it's because of my own personal bias, which, by the way, shout out to the GOAT. He got a win this weekend. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, in this case, however, I am perfectly willing to be a Justin Gaethje apologist and to defend his recent statements saying he deserves the next title shot. He has gone so far as to say he will retire if he does not get it. And a lot of people are kind of responding in a very cynical way, just kind of saying, okay, bye, see ya. If you don't want to fight, don't fight, leave. Which I think is kind of weird because when we look at who would jump over Gaethje, there's not a lot of good options. So let's take a look here. Take a look at this top 5 here. Okay, obviously Ilya's the champion. Number 1 is Islam Makhachev. Now, if Islam wanted the title shot, he could of course have it. We all would like to see that fight. We were asking for it for a while. However, Islam is obviously moving up to 170 to fight Jack Della Maddalena for his belt, so we're not getting that. Number 2 is Arman Tsarukyan. This seems to be what the majority favors as the number 1 contender, which, based on rankings alone, makes perfect sense. But we'll talk about him in a second. Number 3 is Max Holloway. Max Holloway would be a good name, other than the fact that he just got knocked out by Ilia Topuria. Number 4 is Charles Oliveira. Again, just got knocked out by Ilia Topuria. And then finally, number 5, we have Justin Gaethje. And then all the way down at number 7, we have the other name in the mix, Paddy Pimblett. Now, everybody says the clear number 1 contender is Arman Tsarukyan, which I think is really weird because I thought we were all in agreement that Arman would have to fight at least one top contender after he ruined UFC 311 by pulling out the day before. And what is so crazy about that is come this next pay-per-view, he will literally have gone 20 pay-per-views without ever fighting. His opponent at UFC 300 was obviously Charles Oliveira. Now, I don't really care what you say. That victory was questionable. It was a split decision for a reason, but I'm not even going to go into that right now. It was a win, regardless of whether or not it should have been. So he gets the next title shot, right? Charles Oliveira, in the time that has transpired since UFC 300, has fought twice and has another fight already booked. In that same amount of time, Arman Tsarukyan, the winner of that fight, the one who took less damage supposedly, has only had one fight booked, and it was UFC 311, which again, he ruined by pulling out the day before because he threw out his back trying to impress Nina Drama. And then he has not fought or had a match booked since. And so what? We're just going to reward him for sitting on the sidelines? We're going to reward him for ruining UFC 311 and then doing nothing about it? Why would we do that? How does that make any sense? Now, the other thing that comes up a lot when we look at this matchup is people say, well, Justin Gaethje isn't a compelling fight for Ilia. It's kind of a waste of time to see, which I get where they're coming from with that. It does seem at this point that there's literally nobody who you can put in front of Ilia who he won't knock out. But on that note, first of all, there's not really any reason to think Arman won't also get knocked out in a similar manner. But even ignoring that, I think there are some reasons why a fight with Justin Gaethje actually is interesting for Ilia Topuria. The moment Charles Oliveira got knocked out by Ilya, I was actually sitting there thinking to myself, Justin Gaethje should be next. Not just because of the rankings, but because I actually did think there was some interesting things he could do here. And there are a few things I noticed in that fight with Charles that led me to that conclusion. Because one thing that a lot of people were saying in the buildup was, oh, we don't need to see Justin Gaethje get choked out in a third title fight, which is exactly what happened to Dustin Poirier, and nobody complained about his third title shot, but whatever. I don't think that's likely to happen. Yes, Justin Gaethje does not have a very sound jiu-jitsu game when it comes to the highest level of the sport. However, if you look at these clinch exchanges with Charles Oliveira, it's pretty clear that Ilya is getting out-muscled and kind of bullied in the clinch. And that's not necessarily a technical prowess thing. I mean, we talk about this sequence here where he gets put in a crucifix. Charles literally just shucks Ilya off without much issue. And again, the technique he used here, getting his knees in between himself and Ilya's body, is good, but a big part of this is size and strength. And I think a guy like Justin Gaethje, who has a pretty spooky scrambling ability, who is himself a high-level wrestler, is not going to be an easy guy for somebody like Ilya to submit, who obviously is a very technical grappler, but he's not necessarily a high-level submission artist. He hasn't gotten a submission in the UFC other than Bryce Mitchell, who he absolutely destroyed on the feet first. And Justin Gaethje is one of the stronger lightweights and is going to have no problem contending with him on the ground. And all that is to say, I don't think Ilya would take a jiu-jitsu based game plan against a guy like Justin anyway. It doesn't really make much sense for him based on his skill set or his style. So, what can Justin do to make this fight interesting on the feet? Well, for one, Justin Gaethje is very slick in the pocket, obviously, and could theoretically remain safe standing in front of Ilya in ways that Charles Oliveira wasn't able to. And obviously, he has some of the best leg kicks in the sport. Now, you have a guy in Justin Gaethje who has leg kick technical knockouts on his record versus a guy in Ilya Topuria who has never defended an outside leg kick well. Seems like a compelling matchup in and of itself. And it's something I would like to see, if I'm being completely honest. I would like to see how Ilya Topuria matches against a high-level leg kicker, even if it's unlikely that said leg kicker will win. I would like to see how the corner of Trevor Wittman and that team deals with game planning for a guy like Ilya Topuria. I would like to see how a fighter like Justin Gaethje approaches a fight with a guy like Ilya Topuria. I think there are interesting questions that could be answered from seeing this matchup. And I'm not saying I'd pick Justin in this fight, not by a long shot. However, Arman Tsarukyan wouldn't necessarily fare any better. He's not the highest level striker. He doesn't have great proficiency when it comes to setting up his kicks, even though he has very good kicks. There's not really any reason to think he wouldn't get knocked out as well. And realistically, he should have to earn a title shot. He should have to fight one more time. And we all agreed to that. Dana White said it. Arman Tsarukyan himself said it. So why not give the title shot to Justin Gaethje? Because I personally would like to see Ilya fight one more time this year and not have to sit around waiting for Arman. And with respect to Arman, you guys all agreed that he should have to fight again right up until he just sat on his rankings until he became the number one contender because the people in front of him got knocked out. How does that make sense? Why would we reward that? And that's the type of argument I make that tends to get a response that's something to the effect of, well, Justin Gaethje hasn't done anything to earn a title fight either. And this, again, is a place where I'm perfectly willing to defend the things Justin Gaethje is saying. I mean, let's take a look at Justin Gaethje's record right now. Here's Justin Gaethje's last 4 fights. Now, recently, the old guard of the 155-pound division, that being Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Gaethje, were all kind of fed to an up-and-coming contender who was supposed to beat them. In Charles's case, it was Arman, and obviously, I feel that Charles won that fight, but regardless, it went on the record as a loss. In Dustin Poirier's case, it was Benoit Saint-Denis, and in Justin Gaethje's case, it was Rafael Fiziev. These were their fights they were supposed to lose to make way for the new guard because all these people weren't the most interesting title contenders at the time. Now, Justin Gaethje beats Rafael Fiziev. He then goes on to fight Dustin Poirier and knocks him out with a head kick. At this point, other than Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje is the guy to get a title shot next. However, Dustin Poirier ended up being the next person to fight Islam for the belt, which is very confusing. Why did Dustin Poirier get jumped when he got knocked out by Justin Gaethje? Well, it was because of a guy called Max Holloway. Obviously, Max Holloway knocked out Justin at UFC 300. And Justin's argument for why this shouldn't be a factor is kind of interesting. He calls it an exhibition fight, and he does that for a very good reason. He was fighting a 145er in a matchup that was done really just to add more value to the UFC 300 card, to make it a little bit more interesting for the fans. He was being a company man in taking that fight. And so he feels that it shouldn't be quite the blemish it is on his record. Now, I personally would say go ahead and jump Max over Justin. I don't care if it was a 45er, it should still impact the lightweight rankings because Max Holloway is now a ranked lightweight. However, like we've established, Max Holloway got knocked out by Ilia Topuria in his fight before his fight with Charles Oliveira. And so it's like, do we really want to punish Justin Gaethje for losing to Max Holloway? Kind of. He probably should have to fight again to earn a title shot, right? Which he did. He fought Fiziev again, which was a very dangerous fight for him. He did get put in a pretty tight triangle at one point, but he won that fight. And then we look at the title fight of Dustin Poirier against Islam, the things he did to earn that fight. It's kind of ridiculous if you think about it, because he'd just been knocked out with a flush head kick by Justin Gaethje, very similar to how Justin Gaethje was just knocked out by Max Holloway, but they favored him because of his win over BSD. Now, why on earth is Dustin Poirier's earning a title shot off of a fight with BSD more valid than Justin Gaethje earning one off of a fight with Rafael Fiziev? Simply, more fans wanted to see Dustin Poirier because he was more popular at the time. We were all spamming Rihanna reels, shine bright like a diamond, have what you will. And it was kind of fun. We all wanted to see Dustin Poirier get his last title shot. Great. But why doesn't Justin Gaethje earn the same thing? If you look at it from the perspective of what they actually accomplished to earn the title shot, Justin Gaethje's is honestly more impressive, especially considering the fact that Max Holloway also just beat Dustin Poirier. And that's the weird thing to me, is the people who are arguing with me on this, none of you guys were complaining about Dustin Poirier getting that title shot. None of you. Even though I personally thought it should have been Charles Oliveira got a cut and was forced to pull out of that fight, not on 24 hours notice, but a few weeks before, giving the UFC time to save it with Volkanovski, obviously. And as a result of that, he was punished by being forced to fight Arman Tsarukyan. But because Arman chose to sit on his rankings and not be active and not fight again the way Charles was made to for the exact same reason, we're going to reward him with a title shot? Somebody explain that logic to me. It makes no sense. How are we okay to punish Charles Oliveira but not Arman Tsarukyan? What has Arman done that Charles hasn't to earn that privilege? So there it is. There's my case for Justin Gaethje being the next 155 title challenger. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this one, so I'd love to hear your reasonings in the comments down below. Go ahead and let me know. Thank you so much.